Parallel routes in Next.js are a little bit confusing topic. And according to me, the confusion comes because most people cannot think of a practical use case for something like parallel routes. So that's why in this video, we are going to first see some of the use cases where parallel routes make sense. And then I will show you how you can implement parallel routes in your Next.js application from scratch. When you go to Amazon.com, you search for any product. Then you click on any of these products to go to the details page for that product. If you like the item, you add the product to cart and then you go to checkout process. But that checkout process happens in a different page also. So this whole process of finding the product, looking at the details page, and then going with the checkout process takes the user from one page to another page. We can improve this overall user experience using parallel routes. To consider this example, we have the listing of all of these products. Whenever I click on any of these products, I open a model that shows the details about this product. And you could imagine that you can simply add the product to the cart and do the checkout process from here itself. So with this, we are not taking the user from one page to another page. All of the process, finding the product, checking the details of that product, and then checkout process happens in this page only. Now, the most interesting stuff is not this model. The interesting stuff, if you notice carefully, whenever I'm opening any of these details model, for example, if I click on this, you will notice that I'm getting a different URL. Let's see that again. Right now, this is images 4. I'll click on this one and you'll see I'm getting a different URL. That means I can take this URL and share it with anyone. And when they open this URL, they'll get the exact state of this application. Now, another use case where parallel routes make a lot of sense, if you're building a complex dashboard or something. So usually what happens is if you're building a complex dashboard, you divide that page into multiple smaller React components. And then React renders these components one by one based on their hierarchy. The problem with this approach is that if the dashboard is really complex, it is going to take a lot of time as React will render these components one by one based on their hierarchy. So what we can do, we can convert some of these components to parallel routes. And when we do that, Next.js can render these components in parallel, thereby improving the overall user experience. And since now these are not just simple React components, but are essentially full-blown pages, we have access to all of the special files that we have discussed so far, such as loading, error, things like that. So we basically looked at two of the use cases. First one, we talked about the e-commerce application, and the second we talked about if you're building a complex dashboard. Now let's see how we can implement parallel routes in Next.js from scratch. So this is a fresh Next.js 14 project. Inside of this app directory, I'm going to be creating two slots. In very simple terms, you could think of slots as sections that we'll be adding to our layout. This will all make sense in a bit. Just follow me. So we create these slots by using @, and then we pass the name of the slot. So let's create a slot called team. Inside of this team slot, we are going to create a file called page.tsx, and this file is going to make the slot publicly accessible. Let's just return some simple JSX from this file. And similarly, we will create another slot, analytics. Since we have created these slots will be called as explicit slot. But there is one other slot which is called implicit slot. And the example of implicit slot is the children. So if you go to layout file, you will notice that we are extracting children. This children is an example of implicit slot. And since we have created these slots, analytics and team, we can access these slot inside of this layout file. Analytics and team. These are both going to be React node only. And then we can render these inside of the layout like this. First, we have the children, then we have this analytics, and then we have this team. Now, let's say in the browser, what do we get? We can see that we are seeing all of these. We are seeing the home page, and then we are seeing the analytics page, and then we are seeing the team page. I have added a little bit of styles to the analytics page and team page so that you can see them a bit clearly. Now, if you have a little bit of experience with Next.js, you know that whenever you create a page.tsx file, we simply make that segment publicly accessible. Does that mean we can do something like this? For example, @team, can I access something like this? No. The reason for that is because slots do not map to route segments. What I mean by that is if you create a folder inside of your analytics slot called views, the URL that you'll be able to access the views in will be /views. Now let's try to understand active state and navigation in parallel routes. So depending upon the user, they could either do a soft navigation or do a hard navigation. Soft navigation simply means when the user is navigating within your application using the link tag. For example, they click on any of the link tag to go to a different page. We call that a soft navigation. And in that case, not all of the component gets re-rendered. Hard navigation is when the user does a full page reload. Now, the reason why this is important, because depending upon if the navigation is a soft navigation or hard navigation, the slots are going to show a different kind of UI. So let's see that in a little bit of detail. Inside of the team folder, I'm going to create a subpage called settings. This is going to contain a page.tsx file. And now this would be the settings page, right? Okay. That means now the team slot has a page called settings, but the analytics slot does not have any page which map to settings. Inside of the team page, I'm going to create a link that will take the user to the setting page. And the URL is not going to be something like this. The URL is just going to be /settings because we are within a slot and the navigation is going to be relative from here. Let's call this go to settings page. And when we click on this, notice the URL in the address bar. So when I click on this, URL changes to settings, and then we are showing the settings page content inside of the team slot. But the content inside of the analytics slot did not change. And the reason for that is because we did a soft navigation. Since the settings segment do not map to anything inside of the analytics slot, that is why Next.js did not change anything inside of this analytics slot. But we have a settings page available inside of the team slot. So that is why team slot got replaced with the settings page for now. But this would be a different story if you do a full page reload. When we reload this page, we are getting a 404 page. But why is that? The reason for that is because you are trying to access a parallel route. And when you are trying to access a parallel route, Next.js has no way of knowing the state of the children's at this time. And by children, I'm talking about these children. So that is why we need to add a default file at the root. And the content of this default file is going to be exactly like this home page. Let's call this default homepage. When I now refresh the page, we can see that we are still seeing a 404 page. And the reason for that is because team slot has a settings page, but analytics does not have any settings page. And since both analytics slot and team slot are part of the current layout, when we are doing a full page reload, Next.js has no way of knowing what should it load inside of this analytics slot. It cannot recover that state. So that is why inside of this analytics slot also, we need to add a default file that Next.js will render in case if it cannot recover the state of that slot. So when we now refresh the page, you will see that we are seeing the default home page, we are seeing the default analytics, and in place of team slot, we are seeing the content of the settings page. So depending upon what kind of navigation is happening, if it is a soft navigation or a hard navigation, user would see a different kind of content. That's all for parallel routes. I'll catch you in the next video.